We are the Stormwater and Sewer Bureau for the Portland, in addition to the tree planting work. That's why this is our standard. You see clean rivers and pipes and things like that. So we do a lot of other stuff. It's not just tree planting, obviously. Some of you probably know us from our long partnership with Friends of Trees, all the years of street tree planting, getting a few thousand trees in the ground every year. We've moved beyond that now. We're focused mostly on private properties and commercial, industrial, multifamily in particular. We're really focused on the willing partnerships, building relationships, and planting on private properties takes more work. It's not just right in the planting strip. There are the challenges of utilities and things like that, street signs, street lights, but we find a lot more opportunity on private properties, but people are also a lot more particular. So there's a lot of site visits back and forth and forming these, what we really consider mini partnerships with each property owner. So I'm going to talk about some alternatives to ash, in particular some that have performed really well for us. First, a few smaller species, Chinese pistache, and these are all, the middle one's not one of ours, but the one on the left that's up on North Lombard, they've performed really well for us. And these are all trees that have maybe some similar leaf shape, they're deciduous, scale, there's some similar qualities to ash trees, in my opinion. Zelkovas, that's just another one up in my neighborhood. Specifically city sprite Zelkovas, one we've planted a lot of. I think we got one right over there, ready for a home. And then Amarmachia, another smaller to medium scale tree that's performed pretty well. Others, a little bit larger, black tupelo, which we found is great fall color. It appreciates a little bit of summer watering if you want to really get a bigger canopy out of it. Elm cultivars, Jefferson, and Emerald Sunshine are two of our most commonly planted ones, and then hardy rubber tree. Now moving on to talk about some other types of trees which are performing at the top of our list, and that's why we're planting more of them. Baker cypress, an amazing tree from Southern Oregon, hard to find, but has been really successful up here. Coast live oak, Quercus agrifolia, along with various other western oaks. Nancy touched on that a little bit, the cold hardiness, and so this gets into where are the acorns collected, what elevation, and in the range of these different trees. But overall, we've found the western oaks have performed really well, in particular out of the evergreen oaks. This one in the middle is at the International Tree Grove, 42nd Lombard, a really cool place to go check out trees. And then maybe my favorite tree, one of my favorite trees in the whole city is in my backyard. This is an Oregon mist, Ceanothus thyrsophloris. Small scale, it's a native evergreen. At this time of year, it's covered with pollinators. It's in bloom. This is about the same time, May, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. Mine is probably 23, 24 feet tall right now and maybe 18 feet width. So it's got a nice, and it does take, Thyrsophloris tends to be more upright. And then if you collect from the right plant that's more upright and a little bit of training, you can actually get these into really cool little trees. One of the knocks on them is, well, other than their shrubs or their ground covers, they don't live that long, but I think part of that is because they get thrown into irrigated landscapes and they don't really want that. Mine's 14 years old now, and if it's dead when I get home tonight, I'm going to plant another one right away because I love the tree and it was worth every second of it. So one of my little favorites there. And these are actually available. You can find them. Sistas Nursery's growing them, and they're out there more commonly than you might think. Some other top performers that we're planting a lot of, the Willamette Valley ponderosa pine, making sure we know our seed source, where they're actually coming from. They're not just, in my early days of the tree program, we've all learned a lot through our careers and not knowing where to source. There's a lot of ponderosa pines out there, and I remember buying them from some guy who had bought a field of them, and I asked him, he's like, oh yeah, I think they're Willamette Valley. Like, that wasn't very reassuring. So I've now go to sources where I really know where these trees are coming from. Incense cedar, Canyon live oak, Quercus chrysolepis, our one like true native evergreen oak tree, like tree form oak to Oregon. Silverleaf oak, Persian ironwood, strawberry tree, cool, smaller scale if you're familiar with it. It's kind of a little gumdrop type tree, so it's not the best fit for everywhere, but it's performed really well. I remember seeing them in San Francisco and really loving them in parking lots and streets. And so we plant those in smaller spaces. Gray smoke tree was high on our list. That's a hybrid between two different smoke trees, and crepe myrtle. So those last few are smaller scale, but have performed well in the heat, and then also in in winter, they've pulled through some of our planting and tree sourcing. I was going to talk a little bit about that. I'm happy to talk to anyone afterwards, but not wanting to let the local nursery, this is not a shot at Nancy, but like kind of steering our own path and not letting what's out in the nursery industry dictate what we plant. We wanted to source trees, grow them, work with nursery partners, ensure our source of quality, quantity, the types of trees and diversity. So I'm happy to talk more about that. A couple cool projects really quick. International Tree Grove, cork oak there, Northwest Industrial area, that's a madrone, ODOT highway plantings. And in closing, this is one of my favorite projects, the Northwest Industrial Railroad, an abandoned railroad corridor where we planted. That's a Canyon Live Oak, Ponderosa Pines. Recently, Trees for Life Oregon did 2 stories, one about climate resilient trees in Portland, and then just this past week, a few days ago, one that focused on our private property program, featuring a couple of our cool projects. So check that out. Here's my information. Call me whenever. Thank you. One of my favorite trees, and we actually were planting them years ago as street trees and kept having low success rates. And so we actually stopped. We didn't want to keep failing in front of people's houses. So we put a pause on that and actually have a test site up in Baltimore Woods where we've planted a whole bunch of different madrones from 1 gallon up to 15, 20 gallons. We got some from BC that were 9, 10 feet tall. I couldn't believe it. And then did different watering patterns, sun, shade. So we've played around with it. And what we did find is that I think having consistent watering, contractor control away from car doors and dogs and sprinklers, we had more success that way. But we also know we learned certain things that had better performance from the drones. We can't necessarily replicate that at any given site because every different site's different. So we tend to plant them in fringe areas, lower profile sites. We'll often put 2 in a planting hole, a couple of feet apart, like smaller ones. They'll like 1 gallon, 2 gallon size, put 2 in a hole. And then maybe if both live, that'll be the kind of multi-stem sort of thing. And if not, we're just kind of hedging our bets and increasing our odds. But we're typically planting 1 gallon up to 10 gallon size. Mahonia Nursery and Vineyards has a pretty good supply of madrones if anyone's interested. And those are a little bit bigger, 2 or 3 footers. We have not. I think, I don't know if some of the older Friends of Trees staff might recall this, but I remember right when we started our partnership, I think there was maybe a particularly cold winter or maybe a bad set of stock. A lot of them failed, I think due to possibly cold hardiness. And I had heard that, and then we kind of stayed away from that. Just Arbutus unido, the strawberry tree, that's what we've planted. Yeah, so no marinas currently for us. Early on, we were shipping a lot of our oaks up from California in big box trees, these great, beautiful cork oaks. And then I've literally seen them bend so far that the tip was hitting the ground and they didn't snap. And so part of our solution to that has been to just get smaller stock, get it up here, plant it smaller instead of pulling them out of these boxes, throwing them in the ground. And I feel like that's worked better for us. And we do, it's interesting the amount of water and accelerated growth. We do taper our water, but I haven't really thought too much about that. Are we possibly overwatering some of our evergreen oaks in the summer? It's hard to manage species per species, site per site, a little less here, a little more there, because we have so many trees. And urban forestry also, we're doing this mass approach. And so it's hard to test soils, custom water, so kind of a blanket approach. And so we may be a little bit overwatering on some of these trees, but I think planting smaller. Yeah. But we've definitely, I've gone out with a broom, like evergreen magnolias, evergreen oaks in my neighborhood on some snowstorms. I wake up, oh, it's beautiful. Like, oh shit, I got to walk around the neighborhood and check on some of our trees. And we have had a few snap here and there, but not as often as evergreen magnolias. Those seem to be a lot more brittle. But the oaks are pretty resilient. They usually work their way back up. But I really appreciate that comment. Yeah, is it an issue for sure? Anything else you want to add?
I mean, I think it also just speaks to the need for adding that, like those structural pruning visits in as you're establishing establishing these trees. And one thing that, I mean, it's only anecdotal, but I noticed a lot of, mostly the evergreen conifers in our snowstorm this year, they all kind of hinged right where our arbor tie was. So maybe that's an idea for spreading out our arbor tie so we have more support throughout the tree as opposed to how we normally establish our trees that way.
One of the things about, we get people saying, why didn't you grow the evergreen oaks? But we've actually been trialing a lot of trees that we've had a lot of trees on trial we'll probably trial a tree for 5 to 7, maybe even 10 years before we introduce it. And one of the things we trial is whether it can be grown profitably. We can bang our heads against the wall and try to get what people are asking for, but if we can't make a profit on it and it can't be dependably grown through ice storms and so on, we'll lose money. We've got a big payroll, so we just have to be practical. And they're saying, well, we've probably trialed crepe myrtle for 30 years ago, there were crepe myrtles in our arboretum and our trials, and it just never has made the grade for us in our climate to be a nursery crop. So that could change, but we've still got some out in the trial blocks, so stay tuned.